Let's start this thing.
Yeah, let's start.
Okay. When was the most recent time you were deeply moved by listening to music or watching a musical performance?
Oh, the last time I was deeply moved. Um, well, I was deeply moved by watching Bo Burnham's Inside during the pandemic. I don't know if you know that. It's a
Yeah.
his one-man show, and I was deeply moved by watching that. I mean, it was a screen. Um, and the last time I was really moved at a live show was probably watching Holly Miranda in Woodstock last year. She wrote this incredible breakup song, just electric guitar and her voice, and I felt I felt enough to cry.
Yeah.
I feel like my standards have totally changed. I don't want to go to any live music anymore because I want so much more than comes off the stage. I'm like, if you're not going to make me like rage inside and scream and cry, I might as well just stay home and go to bed. But I also saw Destroy Boys lately in Boston, and that sort of moved me in the other direction. Like my inner fucking angry teenager like got like relit.
When did your relationship with the ukulele begin?
My relationship with the ukulele started in 2007. It was either 2006 or 7, and I bought it as a joke. I had this one $19 red ukulele that I bought at Daddy's Junkie Music on Mass Ave in Boston, and I bought it to do a party trick at a benefit. And I had seen someone covering "Creep" by Radiohead. Ali McGregor, actually, you know who that is.
Yeah, yeah.
One of
Yeah.
your Australians. I had seen her perform it on auto harp in the Spiegel tent in Melbourne or Edinburgh, I can't remember. And I was like, God, that's really brilliant when you break the song down like that. And then I had to play this benefit, and I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach myself. It's only 4 chords. I bet I can learn 4 chords on the ukulele. I can't play guitar. I've tried many times and failed. So I bought it just to do this one dumb joke at this benefit at the Middle East in Boston. And even just in the playing of the ukulele, very badly, by the way, in front of a couple of hundred people, it like all dawned on me at once that I had been chained to an instrument that I couldn't walk around with. And I was just all of a sudden drunk with freedom and the idea that I could step off the stage and then into the crowd and be with the people that I was playing for. And I was like, this is fantastic. Why didn't someone tell me about this? This is like, I'm always stuck with this immovable instrument. And then I only played "Creep" by Radiohead for like 2.5 years. And I was like, I'm never going to learn another song. This is just going to be my fucking party trick. and then I started actually, like I had to write a song one day. I was in a hotel room and I was like, fuck, all I have is this ukulele. And then I started to treat it like an actual instrument instead of just a gag. And it's actually, I have a lot of deep feelings about the ukulele. It's been a really empowering, toy that turned into a friend.
Yeah. So do you still have that same ukulele?
I do. I toured with that same ukulele forever. And now it's in a box. It mostly needs to be retired.
Yeah.
The strings are almost all gone and it's all like played through. I mean, it was a cheap piece of shit.
Yeah.
And then it also like, it didn't have an input jack, and if I needed a ukulele on tour, I needed a uke that I could plug in.
Yeah. Did you have a fascination with instruments? Like, did you go to music stores, look in the window, or
no,
were there other kinds of stores?
No, I'm like the worst non-interested in gear, like to a point that's almost embarrassing. I'm so functional. I kind of don't care what it is, how expensive it is, what brand it is, where it was made. I don't give a fuck as long as it performs its function. And yeah, I mean, I have pretty cheap taste, but it's good. It makes touring easier because I'm just not a diva. Like, as long as it works and that it's fine.
What was the last creative thought you had?
The last creative
Thought.
Oh God, you don't want to know right now. I started writing a song 3 nights ago, and I don't even remember how it went or what the words were. I put it into my voice notes, where I keep little beginnings of songs. But mostly, I was profoundly happy that it had even happened, because I've been so overwhelmed by other thoughts and other things that I haven't even had the impulse to write a song in maybe 4 months. And, you know, it's always back there. I've never had writer's block. But the tap sometimes just shuts off so tightly because of other things needing my focus and attention. And so I'm really fascinated by the songwriting part of my brain and when it decides to show up and when it demands attention and what turns the tap on and off. I don't have any advice for anyone. I can't really figure it out. But in general, that's actually not true. In general, like, when there's space, I'm like an antenna, and songs just constantly play in there, and I can just grab them like fruit off a tree. When there's no time and things are very stressful and there's lots of other things to worry about, my creative brain just scampers away, or it reapplies itself to like, how am I going to fix this car or this child or, the other things that are in front of me.
Yeah. When you formed the Dresden Dolls with Brian, what was the goal?
Oh, what was the goal? No one's ever asked me that. The goal of the Dresden Dolls was to make an amazing band that people loved, so that we could be in a band as a job. I mean, Brian and I, one of the things that was great about the Dresden Dolls is that when Brian and I met in 2000, October 2000, we both wanted the same thing. This guy and me, I just switched us. Me and this guy, the two of us, we both wanted to be professional touring musicians. There wasn't one of us who wanted that and the other one who was just like, I'm in a day job, but maybe it might be nice to drum in a band on the side. We were like, we want to go into the world. We wanted to be serious. And Brian had already been in bands. I had been writing songs for a long time, but I'd never been in a band. So he was a little bit younger than me, but way more experienced in terms of like plugging in gear and going to shows and dealing with clubs and PAs and all of that stuff. I was on a very steep learning curve. But the point was to, do that and then also just be the version of the bands that saved us. We were both saved by music as teenagers, like really deeply saved.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, well, we have to do that now. We know what it felt like from this side, so let's go do the thing that saved us so that we could leave a wake.
Yeah. The song Coin Operator Boy, I used to hear a lot on radio in Melbourne, Australia, and I believe it was quite popular around the world. Did things change for you after that song got attention?
I love that the Dresden Dolls kind of have one, like, it's the most memorable and the most catchy. it's the closest thing we have to a hit. What's really funny right now is that on Spotify, it's not even near it's near the top, but it's not the top. Right. It's been like ousted by some other songs that have been used in other ways. And Brian and I will sometimes play a set of shows and then realize like, oh shit, we forgot to play Coin Operated Boy. Like we didn't put it on the set list, and no one noticed.
Okay.
No one noticed. So it's not like, I don't know, like, what's a band that has to play a song? What's a band that has to play a song? Like, the Eagles have to play Hotel California.
Yeah.
Or like, Cyndi Lauper has to play Girls Just Want to Have Fun. She's not allowed to do a show and not play that song. I mean, she probably does, and she probably isn't. She's probably like, fuck that song. But like, the Dresden Dolls our songwriting and our stuff is so vast, and there's so much of it, that Coin Operated Boy just kind of like goes in the collection. And also almost didn't get recorded. I thought that song was too silly to put on our first record. It was like the ukulele. It was like written kind of as a joke song. And I felt like it was a novelty song, and it wasn't a good idea to expose that side of myself on our first serious We're a Band, Take Us Seriously record. And the producer talked me into putting it. Either Martin Beasy talked me into it, or we were touring so much while we were making the record, and people loved that song so much that we were like, we gotta do it. And originally also, and I have it in some old notes that I sent to Martin Beasy, the original idea was, okay, we'll put it on the record, but Brian's little sister will sing it. And she was like 12. And I was like, it'll be amazing. The 12-year-old will sing it. It will be fully silly and ridiculous. And then in the end, it was like, it's going to be complicated, and then she'll be on the record, and then people will wonder if it's... So like, I wound up singing it, but I did not think that song was going to be a thing.
Yeah. How different was it creating your first solo album?
Oh, creating the first Dolls record versus my first solo album?
Yeah.
Completely different. Because the Dolls' first record was my first real time in a studio making a full record album. So I was learning how to do it while we were doing it. I had never really mixed. I had never really had that level. I mean, we had made demos, but it was like the level of pressure and intensity of like, this is it. This is the song captured forever to give to the world. And by the time, that was 2003, and then by the time I made Who Killed Amanda Palmer, it was 2006 or 2007. And I knew how to do that. I had made records at that point. I had made 3 records with the Dresden Dolls. But also it was an entirely different experience because it was just me. But it wasn't just me because Ben Folds produced it. So it was just me and Ben, who was kind of like a new collaborator because he wasn't the engineer. Like Joe Costa was the engineer, and Ben's job was to be like, how is this record going to sound? What are these songs going to sound like? What are we going to do? And I had never really worked in that configuration, like me alone and this pile of songs, and then Joe behind the board, and Ben going through a divorce and like showing up at the studio and being like, maybe we should do this, I gotta go. And like, so I was, it was a completely different kind of process than the Dresden Dolls records, which were like very, like militarily planned, like this day tracking, this day vocals, this day overdubs, these days mixing, you know, with a little bit of room to play, but it was like hyper focused. Who Killed Amanda Palmer, beginning to end, took me, I think, 6 months. And, you know, it was go down to Ben's, but then this didn't really quite work. And then I went to Scotland and I recorded a demo, but then we decided that the demo was actually really good. So we piled shit on top of it. And then I came to LA to do strings, and I met with Paul Buckmaster, and I went to a string session, but then we just, like, it was a very loosey-goosey, messy, carve it into an album process as opposed to the Dresden Dolls who like showed up at a studio with a list of songs and it was like, all right, let's make this record.
Yeah. Crowdfunding. You wrote a book about it.
I did.
You copped a lot of flack
I did.
at the time, even though other people had.
And even now.
Yeah, and even now. You were the first to reach $1 million
Yep.
in crowdfunding.
On Kickstarter.
But really, you paved the way for other artists to make it okay for them.
Or maybe I took them into hell.
Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, artists feel okay about asking now.
A little bit.
Do you feel like you paved the way?
I wonder. I wonder a lot about a lot of things. I find myself thinking, especially when it comes to the internet, there's paving the way, but that feels very binary. Like, as if there is one flat, pavable road that points towards progress. And it feels to me that it's a lot messier and more circuitous, especially with anything right now having to do with the internet. Because my Kickstarter was successful primarily because I had built a massive following on Twitter and, like, to a certain extent, the other socials, the Tumblrs and, you know, what had been LiveJournal and MySpace and all of that, and Facebook and Instagram and whatever was, you know, whatever platforms we were hanging out on at the time, whenever that was, 2011 and 12. And it's 2025. Like, our third eyes are getting squeegeed open as to the horror that has befallen us having decided to bring ourselves, our artistry, our commerce, our social lives, our churches, our families into the den and the necessity of social media. And I can't find myself thinking it was all a great idea. Because I feel in some ways like I allowed myself and everyone around me to sign everything away, thinking like, this is great, look, we're all here on Twitter. And like, no one really knew about the tax coming and what it meant that we were helping design something that was going to really fuck us up. And I can't feel like responsible or overly guilty. It certainly wasn't my fault, but in the same way that, like, people now looking back at the 50s and the fact that they were all chain smoking in airplanes might not be feeling personally guilty for, like, that person in the back who wound up getting cancer. It's sort of more fragile and more delicate circling back, because in 2012, when everyone came calling and wanted to talk and wanted an interview and wanted to understand this bright new future of crowdfunding that I was like rah promising, I was so cocky. I really did think like this probably isn't for everybody, but for the artists like me, like, fuck the labels, fuck the system. How could this not be the best thing ever? And there's a part of me that still believes that. But there is also a part of me 13 years on that feels like we needed a lot more discernment. And certainly the labels, the industry, like the money guys, they had no interest in supporting an investigation, a curiosity-led exploration into what this was all going to mean for the artists. No one gives a fuck about the artists. It's like, it's the money. Or there's like a few rare people in the industry who are like, but what about the artist? So in some ways, I feel like I was like plowing this furrow or whatever, you know, heading that way away from everyone and going, come with me, this will be great, without really realizing where I was heading and where it was heading. But also, you know, the most important thing now, looking back, is You know, it was a catastrophe all over the place in many ways. And crowdfunding, Kickstarter wasn't the magic bullet, right? Like it sank a lot of bands because it was harder than everyone thought and it wasn't sustainable. My new job is just taking shit for sustainable crowdfunding and Patreon, which is probably another interview. But I think any artist or anyone who was really on that vanguard of crowdfunding would say, sure, I paved the way, but no one knew where we were fucking going. So I wouldn't say it with pride. I would say it with a kind of a like bewilderment.
Okay. You're being honoured tonight at the She Rocks Awards. How do you feel about that honour in comparison to any other award or acknowledgement?
Right now, at this moment in time in my life, it has never felt more profound to be invited into this world, like this very music industry moment, especially with a group of women, because the work that I've been doing since getting a lot of awards back when the Dresden Dolls were massive and when my solo career was peaking, and before I went away to have a kid and kind of took myself off on a bit of a sabbatical. Back when I was getting awards in 2005, I felt like I was being honored for my songwriting and my ability to, dominate a stage. And my politics and my activism, my all of the jungle of misunderstandings and getting canceled and coming back and doing all of this other work that goes hand in hand with the music, but is clearly not just songwriting or performing songs for people. To be honored for all of that feels delicious. Especially at this moment in time with the incoming administration and my creepy, crawly fear that, having been a very vocal anti-Trump abortion rights fighting feminist, like, this is a kind of a scary moment to be so out, as someone who doesn't agree with all that shit. So to be welcomed into a club, which is not usually, like, I'm very groucho about that, like, clearly I don't, I've had a really independent career, but to be honored by a group of women right now, when, like, the whole regime is trying to sow discord, so much discord among us, it just feels amazing.
Yeah. You mentioned having a son. Thinking about how you were introduced into music, have you consciously tried to instill the joy of music into your son, or do you just hope that happens organically?
Oh, nothing happens organically. Music happens at and around in two people. So we have a really musical culture in my kitchen and in my living room and in the car and everywhere. And there's music everywhere in our life. And one of my favorite things is I drive Ash around a lot because we live in the suburbs, so I drive him to school every day. I pick him up. We spend a lot of time in the car. And my favorite thing to do is DJ for him. And also take requests. And it has given me an incredible education in music, watching Ash just go like, I don't like that, skip that, I want to hear that again. And he doesn't just like any old pop music, like he really, I'm watching this, like, this kid's taste in what he likes, and then I try to, like, read his algorithm and chuck something his way that I think he'll like, and I have to get him in the right mood, because he he fears change like all of us. So like it's like getting him to try new foods and getting him to try new music that he hasn't heard before is like really, it's like a project. But he has brought me back to some of my favorite music, and he's opened my ears up through his peers and the other people he hangs out with. Like, you know, through him hanging out with this 7-year-old whose mom gave me a playlist, I found Olivia Rodrigo. Like, it's a gorgeous way to have a whole new relationship with music as a parent. I love it.
Yeah. Are you hopeful or fearful about the future of the music industry?
Yes. That's definitely not a binary answer.
Okay.
A lot of both.
Yeah.
I'm as hopeful and fearful for the future of the music industry as I am for the future of this country. And I think their fates are going to be inextricably linked. Like, there's no way that the music industry, you know, if we're talking about the commerce and the things and the money and the venues and the, you know, that's going to do a dance with where the country is heading and where the internet is heading and where AI is heading. At the same time, you've got a lot of pissed off artists right now. And I found myself thinking in 2016, Trump is in, everyone I know is enraged, especially the women. Like, what's it going to sound like? What are people going to do? And right now, what I'm worried about is exhaustion. I'm worried that, you know, you had a certain kind of thing happening in the 60s when people were fighting certain forces, and certain artistic forces were driven underground, and you had something in the 20s where people were fighting certain forces and certain artistic movements, entire movements were banned, you know, denigrated, kicked over to the next country, shoved underground. And now I find myself wondering, like, what's the surface going to look like, but what's the underground going to look like? The underground is where to look. You know, there's going to be a kind of a wave of protest music that's going to match the technology of 2025, and that fascinates me, up to and including what people are going to be afraid to do. Because making music on the internet and making music for public consumption nowadays also means that AI can scrape it, and Elon and Donald and Zucky can hear it. And that means that music isn't going to be where we thought it was going to be necessarily. And by that, I mean like digitally and physically, where music is going to live. So I actually predict a literal underground basement show culture is going to start to flourish. Zines are going to start to flourish. People are going to want to get offline because no one is going to want to hang out where they are being censored and watched. So I think I'm hopeful and scared and all of that, but like I have an instinctive knowledge that music doesn't ever go away. It moves around, but it's the deepest thing inside of us as human beings in our DNA. Like, music doesn't stop. You can like try to crush it, and you can push it down, and you can tell women that they have to cover themselves and can't sing, and you can send us to Mars. Like, you can do whatever you want and chain us to a thing and make us make babies. Like, the music is going to be uncrushable. You know, it's right there, right in the center of our souls.
Yeah. Tell me about a few of the most fun days you've had as Amanda Palmer, the performer.
Oh my God. I was looking at, I don't know why this came up recently, but I was thinking about Twitter. That's why. And I was looking at the death of Twitter and so sad about it, because Twitter came into my life at just the right moment. And there was this triangulation of Twitter, the following that I had already created on the internet, I didn't have a child yet. I was like rampaging around the world, and in my power. It was just after the Dresden Dolls and just as I was going solo, and it was the perfect tool for an improvisational, traveling, touring weirdo musician who trusted everybody and would go anywhere and try anything and meet anyone and go to anyone's gallery, cafe, or restaurant, or house, or basement, or attic, or school, or whatever. And it was I was just like a kid in a candy store for a while. And I remember a day in Wellington, New Zealand, when I was doing, it was like a year and a tour where I was really into doing ninja gigs, like flash gigs, wherever. And I did one in Sydney, flash gig tomorrow, 3:00, Sydney Opera House steps, be there. And I called the Opera House and I was like, just PS, heads up. Is this okay? Are we going to get arrested? And they were like, no, it's great. It was back when the Sydney Opera House was run by incredibly cool people. Yeah. And like 600 people showed up on the steps of the Opera House, and it felt magical. And I remember this day right around that time where I tweeted, I'm going to be in Wellington on whatever, Saturday. It was a weekend day. Where should we ninja? And 6 people threw out suggestions, and I was like, okay, well, there's this bookstore, there's this clothing store, there's this weird artist's loft, there's the library, and there's everyone is saying, like, there's this pedestrian mall, and there's this weird pop-up piano by the wharf. And I was like, let's do all of them. We'll make a parade. And this tells you a lot about what I think is fun. Like, I spent half a day mapping, like looking at maps and figuring it out and making a list and like drawing a little map and being like, okay, we're going to meet at the pop-up piano at 2:30, and then we're going to walk to the thing, and then we're going to go to the bookstore, and then like, dear bookstore, it's Amanda. You wrote to me on Twitter. We're going to be at your bookstore probably around 3, but we're going to be coming from the piano, where like the pop-up is with the cow thing, and I put together a whole art parade. And it didn't even at the end of the day, it didn't even matter that I was there. I just instigated it, and it turned into like a 4-hour Wellington street party that started on the wharf and like went to the library and the gallery and the clothing store and the bookstore, and then the last stop was this artist's loft. And it felt like that thing that I remember fantasizing about when I was a teenager. I was like, I showed up, they had all been like making food. It was basically a squat, and people had brought beer and were barbecuing and had wine and were smoking cigarettes and probably doing drugs on the roof. And they had a piano, and I had a ukulele, and people had guitars, and I was like, this is the shit. I live for days like this. This wasn't even manifested until last night at 7:00, and half of Wellington, punk queer scene is here in this room, and no one saw this coming. And everyone here knows that it isn't about me. It was about this collective effort to create something beautiful. And when I think about a fun day, like, that's my idea of fun, is being able to create something like that for a bunch of people and leave an indelible mark on someone's heart, not just with a song, but with a feeling of a moment.
Yeah. What are you most proud of in your music career?
In my music career? I think I'm most proud of not chasing the money. I think I'm most proud of having been and stayed a person who wanted to make a living as a musician loved the job, loved doing it for people and with people, was always happy to get a fat paycheck, but never let the money make the real decisions about what to write, who to be, and how to move through the world. And I'm often tempted to look back and go like, oh, like all the money I left on all the tables and all the paths I could have taken to be more financially successful. But I love that I didn't back down from our early principles as the Dresden Dolls. That was another lucky thing. Brian and I still had back then, and 25 years later, have the same principles, which is we have to make a living, so you have to fucking pay us. But that's not why we're doing this, let's be clear. We're doing this because of what we feel and how we know we can make people feel. That's why we're doing it. And I'm really proud of that. I'm genuinely proud of that.
Amanda Palmer, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.